Good morning, and today we're going to look at the author Herman Melville and his masterpiece, Moby Dick. First, we're going to look at the life of the author Herman Melville. He was a novelist, an essayist, a short story writer, and a poet, and lived from 1819 until 1891. Now, Herman Melville was born on August 1st, 1819 in New York City into a family that had declined in the world. In 1830, his father died in debt, and Melville had to work early. He received little education and had various kinds of jobs. Then in 1837, he shipped off to Liverpool as a cabin boy. Upon returning to the U.S., he taught school and then sailed for the South Seas in 1841 on the whaler Acushnet. Now, after an 18-month voyage, Melville deserted the ship in the Marquesas Islands and with a companion lived for a month among the natives, who were cannibals. He escaped and went to Papeete, Tahiti, where he was imprisoned temporarily. He worked as a field laborer and then shipped to Honolulu, Hawaii, where in 1843 he enlisted as a seaman on the U.S. Navy frigate, the United States. Now, after his discharge in 1844, Melville began to create novels out of his experiences and to take part in the literary life of Boston and New York City. In 1847, he married Elizabeth Shaw, who led an extravagant life. Thus, he had to work extremely hard to support his family. Now, in 1850, Melville moved to a farm near Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where he became an intimate friend of Nathaniel Hawthorne, to whom he dedicated his masterpiece, Moby Dick, or The Whale, in 1851. And for the last 20 years of his life, Melville worked as a customs inspector in New York City. He died in New York on September 28, 1891, shortly after completing his final novel, Billy Budd. Some of the major works you will find from Herman Melville are Typee, which is a peep at Polynesian life, Amu, which is a narrative of adventures in the South Seas, Marty, Romances of the South Sea Islands, and in 1849 he also wrote Redburn, His First Voyage, which is based on his own first trip to the sea. Next, we start getting more into instead of his nonfiction narratives, more into fiction. That would be White Jacket, or The World in a Man of War in 1850, which was fictionalized his experiences in the Navy, and then Moby Dick, the Whale in 1851, a marvelous sea adventure. And then in 1852, you get Pierre, or The Ambiguities, a darkly allegorical exploration of the nature of evil. Continuing into the satirizing and into the romances, we have Israel Potter in 1855, The Piazza Tales in 1856, and The Confidence Man in 1857, which satirizes the selfishness and commercialism that Melville saw in his time. His later works, The Battle Pieces and the Aspects of War in 1866, Clarel in 1876, which is a long poem about a troubled pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and Billy Budd, which was just before his death in 1891, which was a novella about a young sailor personifying innocence, doomed by the malevolent hatred of a ship's officer personifying evil. Now, back to our story, Moby Dick. Since this was written by one of America's greatest authors, Moby Dick is a work of tremendous power and depth, one of the world literature's great prose epics. Again, he publishes it and dedicates it to his friend Nathaniel Hawthorne. And it was first published on October 18, 1851 in London. Now, the background of Moby Dick has two actual events that inspires Melville's tale. One was the sinking of the Nantucket whale ship called the Essex, and the other event was the alleged killing in the late 1830s of the albino sperm whale, Mocha Dick. Now, the most important inspiration for the novel was Melville's experiences as a sailor, in particular those during 1841 and 1842 on the whale ship Acushnet. Now, if we look at the design of Moby Dick, it made sense within the romantic tradition of the time in American literature. Melville wanted to write a romantic text on the whale fishery, giving much exotic information derived from encyclopedias and the world literature of the time. The characters were to be colorful and picturesque, including the Byronic captain of the whaling ship. The novel's plot is also built on one basic conflict: Ahab versus the whale. It is essentially the story of Captain Ahab and his quest to defeat the legendary sperm whale Moby Dick, for this whale took Ahab's leg, causing him to use an ivory leg. Now, when we look at the story itself, we start off with the narrator, Ishmael. And Ishmael, feeling depressed, seeks escape by going out to sea on the whaling ship, the Queequeg. The captain is Ahab, the man with one leg. Now, Moby Dick, the white whale, had sheared off Ahab's leg on a previous voyage, and Ahab resolves to hunt him. Now, the ship makes a good catch of whales, but Ahab refuses to turn back until he has killed his enemy. Eventually, the whale appears, and the Queequeg begins the doomed fight with it. Now, on the third day, the whale carries the Queequeg along with it to its doom. All on board the whaler get drowned except one, Ishmael, who survives to tell the tale. So when we look at this as an epic, you kind of see the sense of a quest. There is a challenge here versus Captain Ahab and the whale. We also have the hero leaving society. His goals are always noble, and he's always on the side of goodness, and his enemies in his mind are always evil. We also see this ideal of undergoing a trial. There are physical tests, such as if you're looking at other epics, maybe slaying a dragon or battling powerful opponents, rescuing maidens in distress. Obviously here it is going up against Moby Dick, the white whale. And then having completed his quest, the hero usually returns to society to bring about a spiritual transformation and restore the perfect human community. Of course, Ishmael is here to be the survivor and to tell the tale. Now, Ahab's quest itself is not a heroic epic. He's ready to sacrifice his whole crew for his personal goal, his revengeful obsession to find and kill Moby Dick. Do not label Captain Ahab as a hero. This is not heroic. Now, for Captain Ahab, the defeat of Moby Dick will represent redemption and a means of achieving clarity and peace. Claiming that Moby Dick is chiefly what I hate gives the whale greater significance for Captain Ahab, who finds that the whale represents all of the mysteries of his life. Now, the quest to find Moby Dick is therefore both an external conflict between Ahab and the whale, as well as an internal conflict within Ahab for a sense of peace and happiness. So then let's start looking at the themes of Moby Dick. First, you start off with the author Herman Melville's bleak view or negative attitude, the sense of futility and meaningless of the world, that anti-transcendentalist ideal. His attitude to life is what he called the everlasting nay. Now, man in this universe lives a meaningless and futile life. Man cannot overcome nature, and once he attempts to seek power over it, he is doomed. Another theme might be the sense of destiny, where there's just fate and you can't get away from it. It's a very prominent theme in Moby Dick. For example, Captain Ahab's death. You have a prophecy with Fedala's death, the two coffins, hemp can only kill him. You can start seeing with the foreshadowing what's going to happen in the end of the story. There's also the theme of alienation, which exists between man and man, man in society, and man in nature. Ishmael is depressed with society, so he wants to get away from it by going on the whaler and the Pequod. You see alienation between man and man when it comes to the men on the ship. They're fighting one another. And then even the idea of man versus nature when we are going after Moby Dick. We also have that theme of loneliness because we're getting away from society. There still are people on the ship, but they all are there for different purposes and goals. So there's this sense of individualism, but there's also this sense of loneliness, that individualism is causing disaster and is causing death. Again, very anti-transcendentalist. We also have this sense of a quest and a rejection of it, because voyaging for Ishmael has become a journey in quest of knowledge and values, which is very different from the other men on the ship, especially from Captain Ahab, whose quest is revenge. Now, when we look at Moby Dick, it kind of seems like an encyclopedia of everything. You have a bit of history here about the sinking of the Essex. You have a bit of philosophy here where we have this sense of vengeance and the sense of the quest of knowledge. We have this sense of religion. There's so many different values put in addition to the detailed account of the operations of a whaling industry and a whaling ship itself. There's so many things that we can learn about from the 1830s, 1840s, and 1850s, from American values, from the whaling industry. There's just so much here in this book to learn. And of course, as you continue reading along, you're going to want to have character analysis of your major characters, such as Captain Ahab, Ishmael, your other characters such as Queequeg, one of the guys who goes after the whale, Starbuck, who's the first mate, and of course the white whale himself, Moby Dick. Starting with Captain Ahab. The name Ahab also comes from the Bible. It was the king of Israel. He also is going to take on that symbol of evil. He's the tyrannical captain of the Pequod, and though he's a Quaker, he seeks revenge in defiance of his religion's well-known pacifism. Now, Ahab does have the qualities of a tragic hero. He's got the great heart of a hero, but he has such a fatal flaw that he is not heroic. Now, Herman Melville, your author, constructed Ahab as a mad imperial figure who thinks of himself as an equal to a god. And Ahab's hubris, his rejection of God altogether for an alliance with the devil, is comparable to perhaps a Faustus. Now, in the story, Captain Ahab lost his leg to Moby Dick, and he is absolutely crazed and maddened with the need for revenge. He has gone insane over it. Now, when Peleg talks to Ishmael on page 85, he says, "He's a queer man, Captain Ahab, so some think, but he's a good one. Oh, thou'lt like him well enough. No fear, no fear. He's a grand, ungodly, godlike man, Captain Ahab. Doesn't speak much, but when he does speak, then you may well listen. Mark ye, be forewarned, Ahab's above the common." Next is our narrator of the story, Ishmael. Now, the name is the first son of Abraham from the Bible. It's a symbol of orphans and exiles, wanderers and social outcasts. He is the narrator of the story, and he starts off feeling depressed and hopes to find an ideal life by getting away from his society. But then once he's on the ship, he notices a secondary society has built, and he comes to see the folly of Ahab seeking to conquer nature. But as he's on the boat, he also feels the significance of love and companionship towards the men on the boats, and learns to accept with an attitude which ensures his survival. Our next one is Queequeg. He is the cannibal prince. He's very well-mannered, but he's still slightly out of place in America. Now, he always sticks to his morals, and he's an excellent harpooner, and he becomes a friend of Ishmael. Queequeg is a very righteous, almost heroic figure. Since we don't really have a heroic figure in Ishmael or in Ahab, we have to have somebody who is going to be sticking to their morals, somebody who's going to be excellent at what they do, and that's who Queequeg is going to be. Now, Starbuck is the first mate of the ship. He does try to stop Captain Ahab's mad actions because he's very careful, calm, he cares about the crew, he cares about being in the whaling industry. He's still thinking of the job at hand. So he's the one who's actually going to make sense. "Oh, Ahab," cried Starbuck, "not too late, is it? Even now the third day to desist. See, Moby Dick seeks thee not. It is thou that madly seekest him." And of course, we also have Moby Dick, who's the antagonist of the story. Now, he's described as being paradoxically benign and malevolent, nourishing and destructive, massive, brutal, monolithic, but at the same time protean, erotically beautiful, and infinitely variable. Now, for your author Herman Melville, Moby Dick symbolizes nature. And for Ahab, the whale represents only a sense of evil. For the author as well as for the reader and Ishmael, the narrator, Moby Dick is still a mystery, like an ultimate mystery of the universe. So if we're going against man versus nature, there is that sense of nature being able to overcome man, but there's also that sense of mystery. Can man actually overtake nature? Next, we'll look at Herman Melville's writing skills. Now, when we take a look at the story at the time it was published, Moby Dick received decidedly mixed reviews from critics at the time it was published. And many critics praised it for its unique style, its interesting characters, and poetic language. So a lot of critics liked what they saw because it was new, and a lot of critics didn't like what they saw because it was new. Now, others agreed with the critic for the highly regarded London Athenaeum, who described it as an ill-compounded mixture of romance and matter of fact. The idea of connected and collected story has obviously visited and abandoned its writer again and again in the course of composition. The style of his tale is in places disfigured by mad rather than bad English, and its catastrophe is hastily, weakly, and obscurely managed. Now, Hawthorne is dedicated in the book. He is a friend of the author, and he said of the book, "What a book Melville has written. It gives me an idea of much greater power than his preceding ones." Now, with the burgeoning of modernist aesthetics and the war, World War I, that tore everything apart still so fresh in memory, Moby Dick began to seem increasingly relevant. So we have to remember that Melville died in 1891 with mixed reviews on his story. Now, after World War I, around 1918, Moby Dick starts picking up steam once again as a favored book. Why? It best illustrates the loss of faith, the sense of futility and meaninglessness, which characterize the modern life of the West, so that the 20th century has found it both fascinating and a great novel. Now, in the 1920s, a Columbia scholar, G.M. Weaver, did solid spadework in reviving Moby Dick, and needless to add, Melville has been on the pedestal ever since. Thus, born in the 19th century, Herman Melville didn't receive recognition until the 20th century. By reasoning of these things, then, the whaling voyage was welcome. The great floodgates of the wonder world swung open, and in the wild conceits that swayed me to my purpose, two and two there floated into my inmost soul endless processions of the whale, and midmost them all, one grand hooded phantom, like a snow hill in the air. Next, looking at some of Herman Melville's symbols in the story, the sense of the ideal of white, the white whale, the whiteness that is brought up quite often. It's a very paradoxical color in the story, because the white whale means death and corruption. But white also usually symbolizes purity and innocence and youth. The ship Queequeg is a symbol of doom almost from the start. Not many people wanted to get onto this particular whaling ship in the first place. Now, the symbolism of a voyage. Voyages are supposed to be searching and discovery and the search for the ultimate truth of the experience, which is what we were looking for Ishmael on the Queequeg. Not so much can he get rich from whaling, but there's this sense of search and discovery for a voyage. Now, Queequeg's coffin ultimately symbolizes the ideal of life and death. Now, Moby Dick is portrayed for the reader from different angles. The author has the unwillingness to commit himself, and the reader is thrown upon himself for judgment. Thank you so much for stopping by to learn more about Moby Dick and Herman Melville. If you'd like me to go through chapter by chapter of Moby Dick, please let me know in the comments down below if you'd like some chapters done or if you'd like something else by Herman Melville done as well. And as always, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed.